Why hello there guys, and welcome to every episode of The Simpsons Season 18 Reviewed. Last time out, Season 17 was a bit of a mess frankly, but maybe some sense of normality will be restored in this season. A slightly better season would not go amiss either. However they do end up ranking though, rest assured that I will give all of the episodes a fair chance, and hopefully will give you guys something to think about with my opinions. I have nothing to discuss when it comes to the production of this season, so instead I'm just going to give a quick thanks to the Simpsons Wiki for helping me deliver the trivia for these episodes. With that said, let's get on with it. Season 18, Episode 1. Lamook, the chef, the wife, and her Homer. Lisa befriends Fat Tony's son, Michael. When Fat Tony is put out of commission, Michael refuses to follow in his footsteps, leaving Homer and Bart to take over running the mob. My trivia here is that the mansion of Fat Tony strongly resembles that of Tony Montana in the movie Scarface. My best moment here was the ending, so I gave the season opener a 3 out of 5. This was a solid enough episode. It was maybe a bit ambitious to try and do a story about Fat Tony's son. I mean, Fat Tony is a minor character himself, so his son is basically a non-entity on the show. Still, I think they mostly made it work. I did find it interesting how Michael had to balance his love of cooking with the family mob business, and Lisa being there trying to support him added more emotional connection to the plot. The only thing I was not so keen on was the pacing. The episode took a while to get going, and Act 1 especially felt a bit boring. Thankfully, things did pick up by the end, which is shown perfectly by the sudden ending. Sure, there was no real foreshadowing to it, but I liked that Michael showed his darker side, and let's be honest, there was a practical reason for doing it, given that these people almost killed his father. The final shot of the doors closing menacingly, only to show him playing with toy cars, was also a funny way to end. In terms of the other jokes here, they were okay. I was not a fan of some, like Homer's dirt nap fantasy, but I liked his and Bart's insane laughing with the weapons, as well as Homer's pathetic attempt to intimidate Moe. Only Homer could work as a collector for the Mafia, and end up coming out with less money than he went in with. Season 18, Episode 2, Jazzy and the Pussycats. Bart starts playing the drums, and finds he is very good at it. Soon he is asked by a rock group to become a member of their band, something that makes Lisa jealous. The title of this episode is a reference to the fictional rock band, Josie and the Pussycats, and my best moment here was the scene of Bart drumming across the town. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. Now, I don't know if most people enjoy this episode or not, but I certainly didn't. I found it just never really went anywhere. Sure, they tried to do the over-the-top things like Bart drumming across the town, or Lisa somehow becoming something of an animal whisperer. None of these things were expanded on though in any real way, nor did they connect well with each other, even if the episode tried to insist that they did. The whole Lisa and Bart thing seemed to lack any real punch, and I never got any emotional impact from it personally. The jokes mostly mirrored the plot in that they were disappointing. The white stripes going off the bridge was pretty nice, but that was about it. On the other hand of that though, you had dumb sequences like everyone choking in church that went on for far too long. This episode may have started out okay, but it lost any focus as it went on, and ended up being incredibly forgettable. Season 18, Episode 3, Please Homer, Don't Hammer 'em. When Marge starts a carpentry business, she struggles to get work as a woman. To solve this problem, Homer pretends to be the carpenter while she does all the work. My trivia here is that the music Duel of the Fates from Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace plays while Bart and Skinner are fighting, and my best moment here was Bart and Skinner's Star Wars style duel. This one is a 3 out of 5. This episode has both a substantial main and subplot, so I will discuss them both separately in detail. The main plot I found to be very up and down, and not just because of that giant roller coaster either. I liked the trip to the rundown mall at the start, which set up Marge's interest in fixing things. However, I did not buy into the main conflict, as I don't believe that people would have this much of an issue with a female carpenter. Now, there may still be some sexism in that industry, I don't know, but even if there is, they took it to ridiculous extremes here, and Marge had to bear the brunt of it. The ending of Marge quickly repairing the ride, only for it to fall on Homer anyway, was very silly, and was not exactly the payoff I was looking for. I found the subplot to be the superior of the two. Sure, it could definitely be argued that Bart was being overly malicious with his new intent to harm Skinner, but this whole thing was so over the top, like I don't think there was no point in taking it too seriously. I mean, they literally had them breaking the laws of physics with a Star Wars style fight through Springfield, for God's sake. So I don't really know why we're getting hung up on allergic reactions at this point. As I said, that sequence was the best thing here for me, as it had a lot of great animation, and the payoff of them still throwing shrimps and peanuts at each other in hospital was very fitting. I did also like Skinner's line of, "You've been waving your nuts in my face for too long." Overall, this was an enjoyable episode, but in order to get to the good stuff, you do have to suffer through some annoyances. If some of the problems here, especially with the main plot, had been ironed out, this would have no doubt been a 4. Season 18, Episode 4, Treehouse of Horror 17. The 3 short stories this year are Married to the Blob, You Gotta Know When to Golem, and The Daily Earth Looks Stupid. So the third segment here parodies the Orson Welles War of the Worlds radio drama and the subsequent public reaction to it. My best moment here was the aliens conquering Earth. This year's Halloween special gets a 3 out of 5. This was a very run-of-the-mill Treehouse of Horror in my opinion. It did everything okay without going above and beyond or taking risks. Part 1 was used as an excuse to turn Homer into a giant blob who goes around eating people. It may have been a bit short on laughs, but it was still an okay concept, which let's face it made a lot of sense for Homer. Part 2 was similar to the first in that it had an interesting concept, but never really took it to enough fun places. It was cool to see this big Jewish statue being a badass at first, but the act did get old fast. Also, I felt like the decision to have him start speaking was a mistake. It ruined the mystique of the monster, and therefore the story. The final part I found to be the best of the 3. It was of course a War of the Worlds parody, which again is not that original. I did like how it was told though. The gritty animation style that was used really did help make it look like it was in the middle of the Great Depression. I also found it clever how Kang and Kodos exploited the stupidity of the townspeople by making them think that their invasion was just another hoax. The ending scene was clearly trying to draw some parallels to the Iraq invasion, which was an interesting choice. I can definitely say that it was a bit out of place, but hey, any chance to mock or criticize imperialism, I am all for. Overall, this is an okay episode. I did not find it that funny, but the story concepts were all at least interesting, which made this decent viewing. Season 18, Episode 5, G.I. Joe. Bart joins the army after some recruiters visit the school. Marge refuses to let him go, so Homer takes his place instead. Bit of information about this one is that the song playing during the assault course is Toy Soldiers by Marquita. The best part of the episode for me was the Looney Tunes style chase sequence with Homer and a mini helicopter. This one is a 2 out of 5. This was a very boring and forgettable episode for the most part. An army plot you might expect to have some action-packed moments, and maybe even some satire mixed in. However, the army base that Homer spends time on is uninteresting, and the attempts at satire were so mild that they may as well not have bothered. Also, the pacing was quite insane here. As I said, the first 2 acts were quite slow and mundane. Then suddenly, things are all over the place in the third. You have Homer on the run from the army, which in the end leads to the town turning the tables and kicking them out of the town. Everything happened too fast, and the characters acted too rash for me to care about any of it. Also, the ending was of course a boring return to the status quo. In terms of the jokes, they were also lacking. A lot of the dialogue was very on the nose, and felt a bit unbelievable at times. Mr. Burns talking to Nelson on the phone was a great example of that. The one thing here which I did enjoy was a goofy Looney Tunes parody. It was quite well done, and captured the style very well. All in all though, very lackluster. On the low end of a 2 even. Season 18, Episode 6, Moe and Elisa. After seeing how unhappy he is, Lisa helps Moe write a poem. It gets instant success, so he's invited to a writer's convention. However, he breaks Lisa's heart by claiming that it is all his own work. My trivia here is that the song playing when Moe parties with the writers is Let's Get It Started by the Black Eyed Peas. My best moment was Homer mocking Moe while falling down the stairs. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. This was another relatively simple plotline that tried to use its characters as a crutch. I think they were mostly successful with doing that. Moe and Lisa had quite a good rapport here, and it was sweet of Lisa to try and help Moe out when he was at his lowest. We do get to see the good and the bad of Moe here though, as he does take all the credit for himself, but hey, at least he learns his lesson, and we have an ending which is a happy one. It is predictable that they make up, but there was enough drama along the way to make it worthwhile. Of course, Moe's betrayal of Lisa was nowhere near as good as his betrayal of Homer in Flaming Moe's, but that is one of the best episodes ever, so that is probably an unfair comparison. What helped out the story here was that even when it got a bit bland, there were some nice laughs along the way. I like some of Homer's lines here, like the rapping tomato poem that he had rejected. And as I said, I also liked his over-the-top mocking of Moe, and his apparently gay poetry. It is just typical of Homer to go off ranting in that high-pitched voice of his, and end up getting himself hurt in the process. Grandpa running from Willie at the Senior Olympics and the family scuttling around like crabs also deserve a mention as some solid jokes. Overall, this episode was good, just not great, and that applies to both the story and the jokes. Season 18, Episode 7, Ice Cream of Margie, with the light blue hair. After buying an ice cream truck, Homer gets a job as an ice cream seller. Marge uses the ice cream sticks he brings home to make sculptures of people. So my trivia here is that Homer suggests that Marge makes a statue of the new James Bond, and this was a reference to Daniel Craig, who starred in the movie Casino Royale, which was released a few weeks before this episode. My best moment here was Otto doing up Homer's ice cream truck. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. So, this is the second time already this season which has Marge learning how to build things. This time she becomes a sculptor purely out of boredom. I actually quite liked the dynamic between Homer and Marge here. The fact that they both got something out of Homer's new job worked well at giving them both something meaningful to do. Of course, they ended up falling out after Homer destroyed Marge's sculptures while in a rush to get back home on time. I do think that they handled it slightly better here than most of the recent Marriage Crisis episodes though, mainly because Homer only did it by accident, and he did seem genuinely upset about it. Also, neither of them ended up moving out of the house, which is definitely a welcome change. Now, the ending where she builds this big sculpture of Homer and gives this sappy speech was not that convincing, but I suppose I can forgive it. The main reason I can is I found this episode quite funny. Homer's antics at work at the start were great, with how he imagines Burns as an ice cream and all. I also laughed when he said he was following my design about Otto doing up his truck with that stupid picture he holds up. I also found Moe's antics with his wooden sculpture quite amusing. All in all, this was a flawed episode, but one which I enjoyed regardless. Season 18, Episode 8, The Ha-Hard Couple. After Bart is the only person to attend Nelson's birthday party, he becomes best friends with him. Meanwhile, Homer gets obsessed with the book he reads to Lisa. My trivia for this one is that the song that played on a tape recorder, which Lisa refers to as County Fair music, is The Horse with No Name by America. And my best moment was Homer reading the book to Lisa. So, Bart and Nelson becoming buds got a 5 out of 5. So as a general rule of thumb, I'm not actually the biggest Nelson fan in the world. The last time he had a spotlight episode was season 16's Sleeping with the Enemy, and I know a lot of people do really love that one, but I didn't really like it. This one, however, did win me over, and it did so with some good character writing. For a start, it was good to see Bart and the kids get back at Nelson, but in doing so, it revealed the insecure part of his personality for all to see. We do get to see all the sides to him here, and it is understandable why he gets so attached to Bart. As far as their brief friendship goes, it was just cool to see them hang out together. It gave us a chance to see Bart in a new role for a change. Of course, they were never going to stay best friends, but the ending here, while a bit over the top, did give us something to muse about. Both Bart and Nelson had fair points about the other. Nelson was of course acting a bit crazy and overly possessive, but Bart also did take advantage of their friendship for his own selfish means. I like how their friendship was portrayed with such nuance. It kind of allows you to make up your own mind about what happened between them. As much as I love the main plot though, the side one was every bit as good. Most of the funny stuff comes from Homer's reaction to Grace's stash. I just love how obsessed he is over this fictional character. Seeing him bond with Lisa over this book is also very charming, and it ends in a very nice way. As far as the jokes go, I don't think they were amazing here, which is why I would not call this episode like an all-time absolute classic. There were still some good ones scattered throughout the episode though, such as Milhouse saying to Bart, it's better to walk in on both of your parents instead of just one, or Homer's alternate ending to the book. This was an episode which I enjoyed pretty much all the way through. Season 18, Episode 9, Kill Gil, Volumes 1 and 2. The Simpsons let Gil stay with them during Christmas. However, he stays for 11 months because Marge is unable to tell him no. So a fun fact about this one is that it was broadcast exactly 17 years after Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, which is of course the first episode of the series. And it's kind of crazy to think that this episode aired over 15 years ago now, so it's almost as big a difference between this episode and the present day as this episode and Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire. That really does put in perspective just how long this show has been on the air. The best moment for me here was Krusty's show at the start. I gave this one a 1 out of 5. So I guess this was a Christmas and Gil episode rolled into one. That is a pretty odd combination, and it is odd for a reason. It didn't work. I found this to be a chore to watch. Gil is a bit uninteresting and repetitive at the best of times, so centering a whole episode around that is just asking for trouble. The plot was based around Marge feeling pity for Gil and taking him in, which is fair enough given that he did help Lisa out with her present, but the premise of a guest mooching off The Simpsons has been seen before loads of times in the past, and in the past, Marge has had no problem kicking people out. So it seems like this episode was trying to bring out this new character trait in her that felt very unbelievable. That in turn made the ending of her travelling to Scottsdale to tell him no completely unsatisfying. As I already alluded to, the jokes were also pretty poor here. Krusty and Mel chilling watching TV instead of doing their skating at the TV show was the only okay one. There were some real bad ones too here. The bit about Homer leaving Santa's little helper in a hot car, that was just disturbing. Season 18, Episode 10, The Wife Aquatic. After seeing some old home movies, Marge remembers Barnacle Bay, a place from her childhood. Homer takes her back there, but it is not how she remembers it. My trivia for this one is that this was the highest rated episode since Season 16's Homer and Ned's Hail Mary Pass, which aired right after the Super Bowl. My best moment here was Homer getting the Barnacle Bay carousel cleaned up for Marge. I gave this one a 3 out of 5, and that does signify a very middle of the road episode here for me. It had an okay plot which kind of shifted gears halfway through. The first half was about Marge coming to terms with how Barnacle Bay had gone downhill, while Homer tried to cheer her up. I do like that he did make an effort to get things back the way they were. Sure, he was too lazy to fix the carousel himself, but it is implied that he paid the workers to do it. After the family discover why the place went downhill, Homer is roped into being a fisherman, and him using the wrong bait somehow brings back the Yum Yum fish. That is a bit silly and is one of a series of coincidences which make the plot happen. You also have a storm which Homer and Bart somehow survive, along with many more. Despite these contrived moments in the story, I was still intrigued by what was going on, which meant that they never really bothered me as much as they could have. There were also a few lines here which I did find funny. Moe saying, "Even I hope it's not porn," about patting someone's video is one, and the fisherman saying, "That's right, I know about Milhouse," to Lisa was another. Moe actually has a second good moment in the episode. There is this scene where he has this cliche feeling that Homer is in trouble, and wants to go and help him, only to get cold feet when he sees a tiny bit of rain outside. Season 18, Episode 11, Revenge is a dish best served 3 times. When the rich Texan cuts Homer off, he is angry and swears revenge. This prompts Marge, Lisa and Bart to tell him 3 tales of revenge. So at one point in this episode, Homer requests his favourite story, The Count of Monte Cristo. However, he is unaware that Marge had already told it. My best moment here was Bart as Batman. This one is a 3 out of 5. So this is this season's rendition of a non-Treehouse of Horror 3-parter, and like many of its contemporaries, it ended up being average. The overarching theme of revenge did at least give the stories a base level of stakes, and all 3 of them were at least mildly interesting. Marge's story was the weakest of the 3, just because Moe stealing Marge away from Homer is very played out in these type of fantasy stories. The second was a very simple story of Milhouse getting revenge on bullies with this magical glove. Him going nuts with his newfound power was kind of fun, And let's face it, it does make sense that Milhouse would get carried away. The final part was good, just to see Bart as a stand-in for Batman, and I did like the brief montage of him getting in shape. The jokes were okay, which actually makes them above average for trilogy stories. I enjoyed the "Who Shot Mr. Burns" reference, where Homer claims he did it and pinned it on the baby. I also liked the rich Texan's sheer confusion and disbelief when Homer said there was only 2 stars in the sky. As far as these type of episodes go, this was alright, not an episode I regret watching. Season 18, Episode 12, Little Big Girl. For saving Springfield from a fire, Bart is rewarded with a driving license. However, he gets bored of driving Homer around, so he goes on a run with a girl named Darcy. My trivia here is that the scene in which Bart and Darcy are slurping spaghetti references a 1955 Disney film, Lady and the Tramp. And my best moment was the ridiculous way the fire got started and the reaction that Cletus had to it. This one is another 3 out of 5. This was kind of a weird episode for me to rate because the actual main selling point of this episode, which was Bart with this girl, never even got started until about 12 minutes in. That meant that it was quite poorly paced, and you could tell that they kind of had to rush things through. In my opinion, it was all too fast. They never really invested enough time in Darcy, or gave her enough of a personality to get me to care about her. I mean, she's a girl who's 15 and she's pregnant. That's kind of the beginning and end of it, really. I would at least say that they did manage to handle Bart quite well. He has his rebellious side with all the pranks at the start, but he also kept the innocence of a child when it came to his relationship with her. I do buy that he probably did like her to some extent, but at the end of the day, he has no idea about this kind of thing, and was obviously not ready to be married or to look after a kid. I did kind of find it interesting that his one request was for a driver's license though. I mean, he did already get a taste of that in Bart on the Road, so I kind of thought he would try something more out there, but clearly not. The Lisa side plot, where she lies about having Native American heritage, was interesting enough. I like how nobody seems to question her, about how her tribe name is the same as a microwave. In terms of the jokes here, I personally did not find this episode that funny, although a few of Homer's lines were decent. I think you can go ahead and chalk this one up as another average episode. Season 18, Episode 13, Springfield Up. Declan Desmond films a documentary about how the people of Springfield changed over the years. Homer tries to make him believe he is rich by taking over Burns Manor. So a bit of inconsistency here with the timeline. In this episode, Smithers is shown in a kindergarten at the same time as Homer. However, in Season 13 episode The Blunder Years, he was shown as a baby when Homer was 12. And the best thing about this episode for me was just seeing how all of the characters were as kids. This kind of pseudo flashback plot gets a 4 out of 5. This was an interesting one, and it was good to see Declan again. I mentioned in his previous appearance that I do like how he plays all other characters, and he did that well again here. I also appreciated the opportunity to learn more about how the other side characters were growing up. In flashback plots, it is usually only Homer and Marge who get the spotlight, but here a lot of characters get their moment. Even minor ones like the Crazy Cat Lady and Disco Stew, who I did not even recognize as kids straight away. Sure, Homer tricking Declan by seizing Burns' mansion was kind of silly, but I suppose it made for an interesting reveal initially. I also like the ending here. Declan does prove that he is not a bad guy by cheering Homer up, and it is just good to see Homer appreciate some of the good things about his life, instead of moaning about it like he usually does. The Satan You're My Lady song was also decent. It was funny seeing how out of place Declan was with it. The jokes were about par for this season, which incidentally makes them the weakest part of the episode. I'm not too bothered by that though, as I was just enjoying seeing how the characters changed throughout the years. Season 18, Episode 14, Yokel Chords. Lisa starts to tutor the Spunkler children. However, Krusty soon gives them an act on his show. Meanwhile, Bart has to see a counselor for scaring the school children with a story. My trivia here is that the video game Death Kill City 2, Death Kill Stories, is a reference to the Grand Theft Auto series of video games, which I do like, by the way. My best moment was Bart's Tale of Dark Stanley. This one gets a 3 out of 5. So this is another musical episode which is not really a musical. I say that because not that much time is actually dedicated to the songs. The ones we have I am neutral on. I have no real strong opinion one way or the other. The actual main story here was about Lisa trying to give an education to Cletus's kids. At first I wondered if they would flesh them out a bit more, and maybe even give some character growth to Cletus and Brandine. In the end though, they failed to really do that. The kids got involved with singing on Krusty's show, which never really had much impact. It also didn't help that the ending here was kind of dumb, and made Cletus and even Brandine to a lesser extent seem unlikable. The subplot with Bart getting emotionally attached to his psychiatrist I found a little more interesting. It is always fun to dive into that kid's psychology a little bit, and they managed to show that despite how he tries to be the cool guy, he does actually have some problems relating to his relationship with Homer, which probably should be addressed. As I said though, the Doc Stanley tale was the best thing here. It was a bit creepy and came along with a great style of animation, which you can see in that picture on the right there, and it even had a nice little theme to it too. I also enjoyed the twist at the end, that the psychiatrist's son was actually killed by Doc Stanley. That was an interesting note to end on. Season 18, Episode 15, Rome Old and Juliet. After bonding while babysitting, Selma and Grandpa decide to get married. Meanwhile, Bart and Lisa build a fort of boxes they get from a delivery company. So the montage song that we get here is She Really Going Out With Him by Joe Jackson. And my best moment was the battle that Bart and Lisa have with the shipping company workers over their box fort. This one is a 3 out of 5. This plot can be best described as saying, how about a crazy wedding where something happens do 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 do. Yeah, that was this plot in a nutshell. In all honesty though, it was not that bad. I don't think that Grandpa and Selma's relationship was supposed to be taken too seriously. The way the episode presents it is that they both got together purely out of desperation. In a strange way, that makes it slightly more believable and less forced. At least to me it does. Also, I think the two did have some nice moments together. And it was kind of nice to see as a bit of an underdog story, because those two are rarely ever seen by anyone in a positive light. There were some bad moments in here too, don't get me wrong. Homer and Patty trying to break them up was not necessary, and the ending of Abe basically burning the house down was over the top, even for him. The subplot was better overall, and was where most of the fun came from. I enjoyed how over the top it was, and it was a bit of a masterstroke to pull a Lord of the Rings with that massive fight sequence. Some of the funny moments that section had was Nelson's cameo and a random dragon out of nowhere. This side of things definitely helped the entertainment value of the episode out big time. Season 18, Episode 16, Homer Razzie. Homer gets a job as a tabloid photographer and takes photos of famous people, but they get irritated and hire one of their own to take pictures of Homer's humiliating moments. Bit of information about this one is that the couch gag of Homer's evolution was the longest in the series at the time, and it would remain that way until season 26, where they had the Rick and Morty couch gag. My best moment here was Rainier Wolfcastle, basically whenever he was on screen. This one was a 4 out of 5, so this was indeed a story about Homer becoming a paparazzi, but Act 1 was not related to that at all. I quite enjoyed the elaborate build-up that went into Homer getting his camera. First, he starts the fire by failing to blow out candles. Then they get a fireproof safe which itself catches fire and destroys Marge's family photo album. As silly as that sequence may have been, it did lead into the photography in a believable way, and Homer getting in the business when he senses a quick buck makes perfect sense. As it goes on, this episode does tread a predictable path, but it does at least try to have a little fun with it. It has quite a few good moments and jokes, like the guy saying, "This has page 1 written all over it." The punchline being that not only did Homer actually write that all over the photo, he did it to remember what page he was on in a book. Then you have Frederick Tatum's appearance. He has some fun lines as he usually does, and I suppose it could be considered a mini rematch from the Homer Lay Fall. As I already said, of course, Rainier Wolfcastle was also a blast, and with his numerous good one-liners, he is the best part of the episode for me. Homer and the celebs do make up in the end, and after seeing how much bad blood developed between them, it was good to at least end on a happy note. Well, maybe not a happy note for Marge, as Wolfcastle steals her movie script. Season 18, Episode 17, Marge Gamer. Marge discovers the internet and gets hooked on an online game called Earthland Realms. Meanwhile, Homer becomes a soccer referee and has to ref games involving Lisa. So my trivia here is that Homer headbutts a linesman, which is a nod to when Zinedine Zidane famously did it to Marco Materazzi in the 2006 FIFA World Cup final. And my best moment was Bart's character being killed by the townspeople in the game. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. This episode had two rather different plots. Lisa playing soccer, or football which I'm going to call it given I am from England. That whole side of things came from nowhere. Lisa was very annoying with her cheating antics and even tried to make Homer feel bad about doing the right thing. At least she did learn a lesson in the end, which does salvage that story somewhat. Also, although simple, the Ronaldo cameo was decent, just because it was cool to see a legendary football player on The Simpsons. The main plot of Marge and Bart playing this MMORPG fared much better. It was nice to see Marge get up to date with something like this, and she genuinely seemed to be enjoying it. Bart as his fearsome Dark Knight also had his moments. And with the townspeople's characters finally ganging up and getting revenge on him, the whole thing had a pretty fitting conclusion. I would say that they managed to capture the feel of this type of online game quite well. Maybe not quite to the extent of a South Park WoW episode, but still quite good. As far as the jokes here go, they were decent. I liked the one about Moe's character being a troll, and I also liked the observational one of Marge scrolling through the internet sites. All in all, the main plot here was reasonably good, and the subplot was somewhat mediocre, which balances this out to being an average episode. Season 18, Episode 18, The Boys of Bummer. Bart drops the catch, which costs Springfield the Little League Championship, and the townspeople won't let him forget it. So my trivia here is that the episode's title is a play on the book The Boys of Summer, which dealt with the Brooklyn Dodger baseball team of the 1950s. The best thing about the episode for me was Homer becoming a mattress salesman. So, did the Boys of Bummer bum me out? Yes, it kinda did, sadly. I gave it a 1 out of 5. Now I know by looking from the comments of some previous videos that some of you guys were expecting this rating, but maybe it's not a 1 solely for the reason you're expecting. I did not give this a 1 purely because of the town's cruelty to Bart, because I don't think the writers actually intended for this to be a serious plot. I think they were trying to make it over the top and by extension funny. The problem was that they completely butchered the execution of that. The reason they butchered it is that hardly anything that happens is actually believable. For a start, it makes no sense that the Springfieldians are this obsessed by baseball anyway, and it makes even less that they would make fun of Bart so relentlessly. The scene where Bart jumps off the silo is an infamous one, and I guess it deserves to be, if only for Chief Wiggum telling him to jump. Wiggum really is an asshole here, by the way. The ending, while trying to lift the mood and somehow make this a happy ending, it sadly fails from a characterization perspective. The idea of a fake game is dumb, and how the town goes along with it is just as unbelievable as them harassing Bart earlier. Also, Bart himself, I feel, should be smart enough to realize that this is a total farce. The Homer mattress plot was slightly better. I did like the Lovejoys getting a bigger role once again, and the two families going back and forth over this one mattress was pretty enjoyable. Even here though, the two stories totally failed to complement each other, and felt like two different episodes to be honest. It left the whole episode feeling very disjointed. At the end of the day, I don't quite hate this one as much as some people, who literally like have this as their least favourite episode of the show or something. I personally think that there have been far worse episodes, but no doubt the writing here left a hell of a lot to be desired. I actually think that last season's $1 Million AB is a very good comparison to this. They both have a similar plotline and they are both equally bad. Season 18, Episode 19, Crook and Ladder. Homer, Moe, Apu and Principal Skinner become volunteer firefighters, but they get tired of not getting a salary, so they decide to start taking their own. So an interesting bit of continuity here is that in the previous episodes, Brothers Little Helper and Homer the Heretic, Skinner, Moe and Apu were already volunteer firefighters. Maybe this episode took place before them, I don't know. And my best moment was, I have 3 kids and no money. Why can't I have no kids and free money? That quote by Homer. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I found the plot to be a bit weak and unfleshed out. It was the typical morality play, where Homer and his friends do something wrong and learn their lesson in the end. However, what they did was quite serious and the episode never really treated it that serious. And the whole Bart and Lisa being sad at Homer, that wasn't really given any time to develop, so it felt a bit rushed to me. That being said, however, there were a number of good lines and moments along the way to make this episode comfortably above average. The fireman angle got introduced quite late, at the end of Act 1 to be precise, so that meant that everything had kind of a frantic feel to it in the episode. That hurt the plot because they had to kind of rush the plot points in, but I think it helped the jokes because they just had more variety and wackiness to them. I think the reason why it works is that Homer, Moe and Apu just play off each other quite well, and Skinner provides a nice moral contrast to them. As well as that great Homer quote, which was my favourite, some other jokes I liked here was Apu tricking Homer and Moe into thinking he had been reincarnated, Skinner's rant to Homer, which we only partially get to hear over the siren, and the job briefing that Mayor Quimby gives the crew. The comedy here was definitely better than the story, but after taking everything into account, I did find this an enjoyable and fun episode to watch, just not a classic or anything. Season 18, Episode 20, Stop or My Dog Will Shoot. After saving Homer from a cornfield maze, Santa's little helper gets sent to the Animal Police Academy. This causes Bart to get a new pet, a snake. So my trivia here is that the last line of Groundskeeper Willie after he adopted the python is, "That'll do, snake, that'll do." This is a parody of a line from the 1995 film Babe, and my best moment was, strangles the snake. So this one got a 2 out of 5. And I'll just go ahead and be honest and say that my thoughts on this one are not particularly extensive. This was another tired dog storyline, which does not do a lot to reinvent the wheel. Even during the classic era, I was never a massive fan of Santa's Little Helper stories. I find they tend to be a bit boring and repetitive. After all, he is a dog, so they can't exactly develop his character or anything. Instead, they usually end up giving him a new job, which ends up causing Bart to miss him. That is exactly what happens here, and I did not find any of the scenes of him as a police dog entertaining. The jokes were also quite bad, with such chestnuts as Homer saying, "Oh, this is corn," after already being in a corn maze for ages. There are just so many on-the-nose, dumb jokes like that. The only thing which saves this from being a 1 is Strangles, the pet snake that Bart gets. I like how it seems to genuinely care for Bart, and the scene of it getting revenge for Bart by strangling Homer was pretty good. It is just nice to see Homer on the receiving end of that for a change. Season 18, Episode 21, 24 minutes. Bart and Lisa join forces with Principal Skinner to prevent the bullies from setting off a stink bomb at the school bake sale. So my trivia here is that not only was this entire episode a parody of the show 24, Jack Bauer, the main character of 24, has a cameo here. The best moment here for me was Martin working undercover for the bullies. This one is a 4 out of 5. This was another one of those formula-changing parody episodes that the show likes to do from time to time. These episodes are usually pretty good, and this one is no different. They got most things right. I have not actually seen the show 24, still, I think just based off this episode, I grasped what the concept of that show was all about, and that is the sign of a parody done right. The story they managed to tell was well written, and interesting all the way through. They set out the themes early on with Marge's cake, which comes back into play in the end, as well as setting the seeds of Bart, Lisa, Skinner and the nerds working against the bullies and Martin. As I mentioned, seeing Martin in this bad guy type of role was the best thing here in my opinion. It is just so rare that we get to see that side of him, and the crazed look on his face as he knocks out Bart was just the icing on the cake. The ending was alright, with Marge's cake coming to the rescue, and a gag of blowing up Shelbyville. I just wish we got to see the bullies again after their plan failed. The only thing stopping this from being a 5 for me was the comedy. I just didn't really laugh at this episode too much. However, I will admit that the running joke of Principal Skinner trying to hide what was going on from Superintendent Chalmers was pretty clever. Season 18, Episode 22, You Can't Always Say What You Want. After Homer buys the 1 millionth ice cream cone at a local store, he ends up on the news. But after he causes Kent Brockman to swear on live TV, Brockman gets fired. So my trivia here is that The Simpsons movie was released at the end of this season, making this the final pre-movie episode. And my best moment was Homer at the dentist. The season finale gets a 4 out of 5. The first half here was very good in my opinion. It had some funny moments, including 2 great ones from Homer. His over-the-top screams at the dentist were great, as was his shock when being told about the 1 millionth ice cream cone for a second time. What's this? I also enjoyed the sequence of Marge rushing home with Maggie. In the second half of the episode, the pacing was all over the place though, and the Fox political situation wasn't as well handled as it could have been. Don't get me wrong, I am all for some media bashing as you know, and as such, the jabs at Fox News are right up my street. I also think the overall message about demanding more from the media and over-the-top media censorship were the right ones. But, unlike some previous episodes which tackled this, there was no sort of subtlety here, and it was a very one-sided take. They made it all about Fox News and the Republican Party, when in reality, I think we all know that the issues go far deeper than that. I was also not a fan of Ned Flanders' role. I don't like using the term, but Flanderization is applicable here. They threw any sense of his caring character out of the window, just to make him a stereotypical offended Christian conservative. At least the jokes were good enough to make this episode mostly enjoyable. The ending was also good for a change up. It's kind of creative how it censors Homer, and acts as if Fox is cutting the episode short. So that is the season done, and here is the season 18 summary. The overall average score for this season is 3.1, which is up from last season, and is kind of around the teen seasons level in general. My least favourite episodes of the year go as follows. Jazzy and the Pussycats is at 5, Stop or My Dog Will Shoot is at 4, G.I. Doe is 3rd, Kill Gill Volumes 1 and 2 is 2nd, and The Boys of Bummer is the worst of the year. The top 5 is Ice Cream of Margie at 5, You Can't Always Say What You Want at 4, 24 Minutes at 3, Springfield Up at 2, and The Ha Hard Couple is the best of the year. So that is all of my stats and rankings for this season. In terms of my general feelings, having just finished watching, I think this was a moderately enjoyable season. If you look at the rating, it is very much in line with seasons 12, 13, 14 and 16. I think those seasons are very similar in terms of quality. In fact, out of all the teen seasons so far, I think it is only 15 and 17 which stand out as being a bit worse than the rest. There were 2 1-rated episodes here, but I don't think they quite compare with the very worst of the series. Likewise, the good episodes here for the most part were not amazing. The Ha Hard Couple does stand out, as there was some good character writing there, which isn't that common for this era of the show. Also, in fairness to this season, there were a lot of 4 out of 5s. I think that is down to the genuinely solid jokes this season. In almost every episode there were some moments which I enjoyed or found funny. I would actually say that this is one of the funniest seasons for a while, since about season 12 I would say. Of course, humour is oh so subjective though, so if you disagree on that then that's totally fair. Unlike pretty much all of the previous seasons, I did not notice any obvious recurring themes or plots here. It just felt like a very run-of-the-mill Simpsons season. Maybe if you guys have an eye for that sort of thing, you can tell me in the comments if you noticed anything interesting this season. I also find that the run-of-the-mill feel extends to the characters as well here. We got quite an even spread of faces across the season, and I never found myself getting bored or fed up with a character, which I guess is a positive, right? Anyway, that is all I have to say for this season really. My end of video notes were not quite as extensive as they have been in the past. Also, after this season obviously comes the Simpsons movie, and I'm not going to cover it in this series because I've already kind of done a mini review on it. But to anyone who's interested, I will link that review in the description of this video. Regardless, I thank anyone who watched this video, and anyone who continues to follow this series. Thank you guys, and take care.